Desert Boy here. Hey, today I thought I'd talk a little bit about single actions, and I was doing the video talking about maybe trading my Ruger Blackhawk, which I didn't do in the end, but I'm still looking for some single actions in 357. So what is the thing about single actions? Well, it goes back to the original cowboy guns, but probably the most popular model being the 1873 revolver that was, I think, generally they think of them as a single action army built by Colt. And single actions generally what they require is that you have to actually pull the hammer back on the gun before you pull the trigger in order for the gun to fire. So single actions are a little bit different than double actions, which you see a lot of times with, maybe you've seen, shows where people have a detective, special or something, and they pull the trigger and the hammer goes back and the gun's fire. That's a double action. And if it's one that has a hammer, a visible hammer, it's a double action, single action. But we're just talking about single actions here. So it all kind of started in the Old West, and that's kind of the appeal of it. I think a lot of us, we want something to do, something that's kind of like the Old West and kind of cowboys and cowboy action shooting. If you've never seen that, I would encourage you to go see, think about going to see a cowboy action match. It's a lot of work people put into it about, dressing, for the spirit of the era and everything. And it's pretty entertaining and interesting. You might learn something. So for me, when I started out, the other thing is there's ways to start out. Maybe, in if you want to pursue firearms or shooting or something like that as a hobby. Single action might be kind of a less expensive way to do it, especially starting with 22 long rifle or 22 LR. So let's talk about that a minute, and then we'll go ahead and talk about that, and I'll show you a 22 LR single action that I have. So yes, I do enjoy cowboy action shooting, and but like a lot of people, when I started out in shooting way back when, I had a revolver that I got from my dad, and it was a 22, and 22 ammunition is generally relatively inexpensive, and I'm not advocating any particular brands or anything. And also, if you want to get started in shooting firearms and things, you want to get all the training, and you want to follow all your local, state, and federal firearms rules, laws, permits, everything that's required for you to enjoy that or participate in that. But 22 LR, like this 100 rounds here of this target ammunition, at the time I bought it was about $12. There's a lot of different manufacturers. That happened to be CCI Mini Mag Target, but they make it with hollow points and solid round nose, and they make Remington makes it, and Aquila makes it, and Winchester makes it, and Spear makes it, and so does Hornady, and there's just a whole bunch of different ones out there. And a lot of times people will buy it in bulk, so buy a 325 round box or a 500 round box, and it's pretty inexpensive. So what's the other part that makes it more reasonable? Well, this happens to be here a 22 Wrangler by Ruger. This happens to be a Blackhawk holster. It looks somewhat like some of the Uncle Mike's ones. Generally inexpensive. Getting you a nylon holster doesn't usually cost too much. So with the single action, remember what I said. In order to fire, to pull the trigger and get it to fire, you have to cock the hammer. But before we do that, we want to check this safe. And it just happens with the Ruger Wrangler, the more modern Rugers. And you got to know your specific model, but the more modern Rugers, particularly this Ruger Wrangler, you open what we call the loading gate, and you can turn this loading gate, and you can see that there's no rounds in there, or see what the status is, whether it's loaded or unloaded. In this case, it's unloaded. Now we'll do that where I can see them. And then what you would do if you were going to fire this gun is you would put a round in, rotate it, right, and so forth. This gun happens to be equipped with a transfer bar safety, and what that allows is if you were to put all 6 rounds in here, the transfer bar safety is designed by Ruger so that the hammer doesn't contact the firing pin. Because what's the significance of that? Well, if you were to drop a gun and it was not a transfer bar safety or some other safety mechanism type of weapon, if it hit the hammer, it could fire if it fell out or if something hit the hammer. And a lot of your old original, 1873 single action armies, they're all designed without that. And that's why if you see people loading for Cowboy Action, you'll see them only load 5 rounds. And they have a particular method they use where they load around, skip around, and they load the rest of them. So that when they get done, the hammer is resting on an empty chamber. With these Ruger Wranglers, you can still load it the old-fashioned way if you want. Just put 5 in there. But they do have a transfer bar safety. That's something that's a good thing especially for new shooters and things like that. You always want all the safety components that you can get. Safety is always number one. So anyway, once it's loaded, you close the loading gate, make sure it's seated, cylinders where it should be, and when you're ready and pointing in a safe direction at the range, at your target, then you can go ahead, and when you pull back this hammer, if you pull the trigger, the gun is going to fire. It's going to release the hammer, and it's going to go forward. Now, I kind of don't dry fire my 22s because they have pretty strong springs in them. It's generally not thought of as a good practice to dry fire 22s, but every time you want to fire the gun, you got to pull the hammer back, and you pull the trigger, which is down here, right? It's a very light pull in most cases, and it comes forward and fires again. And of course, you don't leave your thumb on there. It just goes. I'm just trying to prevent it from slamming down on the transfer bar and the firing pin. So what happens is the transfer bar allows the energy from the hammer to be transferred to the firing pin, so it will fire in this type of mechanism. Otherwise, there's no connection there, and it doesn't allow the hammer to sit on the firing pin. So what happens when you get done? Well, once again, everything in a safe direction. You have to, and I will turn it this way so you can see, you line everything up. You line up the spent cartridge, and there's this spring-loaded extractor rod that you push the cartridge out with. I don't know if you can see that good enough. There we go. And you do that for all the rounds. That's how you unload the gun. When you're all done with that, if you're all done, you just go ahead and close it up and, do whatever is necessary to make it safe. If you transport, if you're leaving, put it in your holster, lock it up, whatever's required to be safe and in compliance. So anyway, once again, 22 ammunition, relatively inexpensive. Gun like this, they can buy them probably used, although most people probably don't sell them. They just keep them around. And I bought this one. I think the price was closer to $200. I'm not advocating, people go out and do that, but there's probably in the neighborhood of I think nowadays the manufacturer suggested retail price is somewhere around $269 or something. But they're in a range of prices. There's also other manufacturers. There's one called Heritage Arms, and they have their guns generally. They used to run from about 20 or 150 to 200 something. But I know they have become more expensive too. They also make their Rough Rider series are generally a single action revolvers like this. And they have varying barrel sizes. And this also comes in a Super Wrangler, which has 2 cylinders. And if you look over here, you'll see there's another cylinder laying here for this H&R model 649, which is an older 22 revolver. And it can shoot either 22 Magnum or 22 long rifle. And as you have to change the cylinder, there's a process that you go through for that. So sometimes after you get one of these, you may want that or a Super Wrangler, which is a little more money. So you can have 2 cylinders and you can shoot both 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum. I will tell you 22 Magnum is a bit more expensive. You probably will pay about double the cost per round with 22 Magnum that you do for 22 LR. But it is a much more powerful round. It was originally a rifle round. So anyway, we'll talk some more about single actions and when I bring my other ones back in another segment. But I just wanted to kind of show you maybe a way to get started. And of course, we always want to be safe. And just a way, like I said, holster, relatively affordable. Guns should be relatively affordable. Ammo, relatively affordable. And you can be sure to get out there and get all your proper training too. So I found them interesting because, I grew up in the West, so cowboys, So just read Desert Boy always says, and I'll do another segment on my other single actions and talk about why I think they're, great guns to have. So as Desert Boy always says, be safe out there, whatever you're doing.